The story of the origin of Yara is the story of two men that met at a dinner party in Norway over 100 years ago. Together, they created the foundation for what feeds today over half of the world's population. And it all started here in Rjukan, Notodden, Norway. By using hydroelectric power to extract nitrogen from the air, the curiosity of Christian Birkeland and the ambition of Sam Eide not only created the basis for large-scale mineral fertilizer production, but paved the way for the industrialization of Norway. Mineral fertilizer meant famines in Europe could now be averted. Within a decade, mineral fertilizer was now being exported to Asia. The occupation of farming became more viable and more profitable than ever. Today, we are facing even bigger challenges. Our determination in solving these challenges is stronger than ever. It will take collaboration, innovation, and knowledge sharing on a grand scale. For over 100 years, Yara has put knowledge into action in helping responsibly feed the world. Together, we can grow the future.
To contribute to a more sustainable planet. That is our goal. To do more with much less. A more sustainable agriculture through the efficient use of resources. To develop quality products, our effort is based on 4 fundamental pillars. Efficient use of water. We promote the development of technified agriculture, seeking to deliver in each drop of water everything necessary to achieve higher yields and superior quality. We provide products based on potassium nitrate that help reduce salinity accumulation, eliminating the need for additional irrigation to remove salts from the soil. Optimal nutritional balance for high crop yields. To efficiently produce sustainable crops and decrease nutrient losses in the soil. A good nutritional balance is essential. Solutions of natural origin. Our challenge is to protect the environment for future generations. A key part of our effort is the main product of our specialty plant nutrition line, potassium nitrate, which, along with contributing to a higher crop yield, is produced with the smallest carbon footprint in the industry. We emit up to 40% less greenhouse gases compared to potassium nitrate products from synthetic sources. In addition, growers can reduce their CO2 emissions up to 26% by replacing other sources of potassium and nitrogen with potassium nitrate in their nutritional plan. International expertise. We are agronomists at heart and have a network of experts around the world who are constantly researching the characteristics of every crop and the reality of each market, producing new formulations, applications, and technologies according to their needs. Contributing to a sustainable agriculture has a powerful impact on people and the world. We are driven to make this red the sweetest you have ever produced. This orange, of incomparable flavor. And this green, the most natural you have ever grown. We are committed to this challenge, to contribute to a sustainable agriculture, generating stronger and healthier crops that deliver maximum yields through the least use of resources. SQM.
Well, good afternoon to fellow South Africans and good day to listeners from around the world. We have approximately 150 registrations for this webinar from South Africa, from Latin America, Europe and Asia. My name is Duncan Napier and I work for the SQM office in South Africa. And on behalf of SQM and behalf of Yara, one of our preferred distribution partners in South Africa, I would really like to welcome you all and thank you all for signing into this webinar. Today's webinar is titled Onion Production in Brazil and South Africa with reference to production methods and balanced nutrition concepts. We have 3 presentations lined up pertinent to this topic. Before I introduce the speakers, I would like to thank the SQM marketing team in Chile for their hard work in making this webinar possible. Thank you to Brenda, Jordi, and the team. And to the listeners and producers and advisors, if you have any questions during the presentations, please ask them by writing in the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. If time permits, these questions will be answered today, and if not today, then each question will be addressed at a later stage. Our first speaker is Daniel Teixeira. Daniel is from Yara, Brazil. Daniel studied at the Federal University do Rio Grande do Sul, and he did a postgraduate at the Federal University de Lavras in soil fertility and plant nutrition. He has worked for the past 20 years as an agronomist in different areas of fertilizers and agricultural research. Daniel is now a specialist in market development at Yara Fertilizers in Brazil. Welcome, Daniel. Our second speaker is Pieter Brink from Yara South Africa. Pieter studied at the Stellenbosch University in South Africa and started working for the Department of Agriculture in South Africa in 1991 as an extension officer and a researcher. He moved to Kynoch and Norsk Hydro, which later became Yara in South Africa in 2001, first working as a regional agronomist in the Western Cape, focusing on vegetables, especially potatoes and onions. Since 2016, Pieter is head of the agronomist team in Yara South Africa. Welcome, Pieter. Our third speaker today is Felipe Gazeira from SQM in Belgium. Felipe is also Brazilian, but he has been now in Belgium for the past 3 years. He is an agronomist who graduated in the Bahia State University in Brazil, specializing in tropical irrigated fruticulture. Felipe has 25 years of experience working in plant nutrition and fertigation. His professional activities have been honed in more than 40 countries, and his family are also mango and table grape farmers in Brazil, so he has hands-on experience there. So Felipe has worked for SQM now for 10 years, 7 years in Brazil, and for the last 3 years, he is the SQM Global Market Development Manager based in Belgium. So a very warm welcome also to you, Felipe. Right, without further ado, I would like to hand over to Daniel for the first presentation. And his presentation is the overview of onion production in Brazil. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Duncan. Thank you. It's a pleasure to me to be here and share a little bit about the onion production in Brazil and some aspects of this big country and about this interesting culture of onion. Welcome to the system of Brazil. In Brazil, we have the name of the nutrition program is Gran Cebola. It's like a grand onion. And we have some in some areas of Brazil, we have different system of productions. And we talk about about these areas in specific and the system of productions. We have three main areas in Brazil we produce onions. The main is in the south. I live in the south. I live in Rio Grande do Sul, and in the south is the biggest area, around 26,000 hectares. As it's very different of the rest of the country, and the south in the center, like in Minas Gerais and Goiás and São Paulo, you have different system with big farmers and around 8,000 hectares. And the Nordest and Bahia, mostly Bahia and other states of Nordest, we have 9,000 hectares. Is this three main points of production of onions in Brazil? The first, in Bahia, we have the different kind of weather. In Bahia, we have a well-defined dry season. The dry season starts at like March and don't rain more, and get rain again at October. Have very definite in all the year, and have a rain season October to March consequently. And by here we have medium farmers use the seedling, direct seedling system, have irrigation by pivot, and the most system with the farmers use in Bahia is drip fertigation. But in this kind of fertigation, we use the mix system. We use solid, phosphorus solid, nitrogen and potassium, and have complements, and have some complements of other nutrients with drip irrigation. And using, in this case, use nitrate, and only with the water of drip. Some pictures of the system of Bahia. Use foliar fertilizer, Yaravita Folicare, the source of potassium and magnesium, and Yaravita N-calcium, using the base, using the nitrobor, using the base of the onions, in many side dressings during the cycle of the culture. A picture about the image of drone. And here, some aspects in Bahia, because the dry season have lower pressure of disease, and the farmers use high population in the plants, like 8,000 plants per hectare. In this system with drip, it's possible to get high yields. Have farmers will get 140 per hectare, tons per hectare. It's a very good production for Brazil compared of the other areas. Other pictures of the harvest and how the cure of onion in the sun. It's not necessary barns to cure the onions, only the sun, because it's very dry, and cure and put in bags and transport to market direct. And Minas Gerais in the center of the country have other climate, other weather, because here have a dry season, but it's not very definite. Sometimes have a little bit of rain in the dry season, different of Bahia. And this area, we have big farmers, we use direct seedling too. These big farmers use only pivot system of vertical irrigation and big areas. In this case, the population is not too high compared to Bahia, in the Northeast, but use 500, and the system is more intensive, it's the biggest. And the harvest in these areas is around 80 tons per hectare. And compared to Bahia is 140 tons per hectare. It's a good production compared to the systems of Brazil. The image of a big farmer and produce other cultures, produce coffee, produce onions in the same area, but here's in pivot. It's like a companies we produce. It's more a technificate system. And the salt is very different. In salt is small farmers. The system is completely manual. The density of the number of plants per hectare is lower. We work with 400,000 plants per hectare because in the south of Brazil, we don't have dry season. All the time have weather, have rain, weather have more humidity in the air. In this case, the pressure of disease is very, very high. The farmers use a lot of products to stop the disease, and the nutrition have a important paper and improve more resistance, like calcium, potassium, and other micronutrients to improve resistance for the plant. In the south of Brazil, the level of production is very low to compare the other areas. Here is the best farmer in the south of Brazil, like in Santa Catarina, produce around 45 tons per hectare, no more than. In some cases, if you use drip irrigation, it's possible the harvest about 70 tons per hectare. But without irrigation, it's normal in the south, is 40, 30, 35 tons per hectare. Now I showed the process, how is manual, contract people for the other states of Brazil, contract a lot of people, need a lot of people to get to all this process, the transplant and harvest. Here is used the same products of the Nordex, but this other doses of Yaraliva Nitracalcio use more side dressing, like 5 side dressing. The first only with nitric of Yaraliva, and the second Nitrabor, and the others side dressings use nitrogen and potassium, and all this the more 3 is very, very good for the system in the south. Response with the phosphorus have a part of the plant need more phosphorus in the beginning of the formation of the onion, and a part phosphorus by Yaramila and other side dressing extra to improve phosphorus in the system. Have a good response about this kind of management. Here, the example of side dressing use a tractor with distributor in nitrogen and potassium. In the south, have different system of cure of onion because have a rain all year, and the farmers use barns. The cure of onions start in the barns around the 3 weeks, 4 weeks. It's possible to get more time waiting the better price to commercialization. But normally the farmers need money to pay the bills, and in 2-3 weeks start the selling of the onions to the market. There's the challenge of Gran Cebola of the program, the nutrition in Brazil, Yara program nutrition, is the quantity of the nutrients that in those is exactly what the plant needs. Apply the nutrient, apply the fertilizer and the target moment exactly plant needs. In the case is the phosphorus, when applying 60 days after the transplant, the moment exactly with plant needs. With biofertilizer, with biostimulants like a Biotrac, we have a good response because the soil have a lot of quantity of herbicides, pre-herbicides and post-herbicides. And a plant of onion have a strong stress about this ambient, the environment with a lot of herbicides, and have a response of biostimulants and improve the root growth, develop the plant better. In the case of Bahia and Minas Gerais, good source of fertigation, fertilizer to fertigation, soluble, we have a response to the culture. And mostly in the south, we have a response to a part of calcium, potassium, copper in the dose exactly to improve resistance to disease. We have good responses. And nitrogen, and especially, have a good response in improve yields and onions, and have some results about the research. And nitrate sours improve more cations like potassium, calcium, and magnesium. When a plant have more nitrate in the fertilization management, improve like a double and potassium and calcium. Is a point very, very strong to get more resistance about disease. It's very important. And I show in the last a research of EPAGRE. EPAGRE is the most center of research in South Brazil. And in this trial, we have different sources of nitrogen and potassium. In the first, we have Yaraliva, Nitrabor, nitric foam sours, and chlorides potassium. In the second, nitrobor more any calcium is nitrate plus sulfate of potassium. In this is sulfate, ammonium sulfate and urea. And here we have more class. In Brazil is very, very important, the kind of onion, the size of onion to get class. And you get class, you get more money. About the class 3, for example, 2 times more than the class 1 or 2. Here is the class is about weeks ago, 50 cents of dollar, this price of this class 3, and this class 1 or 2 is 20 cents, half part of the price. And this point we show the production, and more production of class 3 and 4, and the farmer get more money about the production and mostly about the class, about the size of onion. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm grateful. Thank you, Duncan.
Thank you very much, Daniel. And it's very interesting. The different production areas give you different yields, different plant populations. You've got to handle them differently. You've got to cure the onions differently. And, not all of us understand the Yarra-Lever and the Nitrobor, but I'm assuming the first two were higher nitrate, but we can come back to that later. Let's get on to the second talk today, and that is by Pieter Brink of Yarra, South Africa, on the nutrition of onions in South Africa. Thank you, Peter.
Hi guys, I hope you can all see me. Yeah, so good. What would we say? Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to some of our attendees. Yeah, I'm going to talk a bit about production of onions in South Africa from my point of view and from Yarra's point of view here. So let's proceed. And for this talk, I will start with the end and first look at harvest. This will sort of give us a guidance of what I'm going to speak about during this talk. If we look at the slide, you will see I'm talking about potential yield and actual yield. And the difference between the two is the yield gap that we usually talk about. Now, potential yield is the yield of a cultivar when grown in environments to which it's adapted, with nutrients, seed, water, non-limiting, and with pest diseases and so on efficiently controlled. So that is absolutely the maximum which you can get out of a variety or a crop, and it's determined by the radiation, temperature, the crop's character, and so on. But then we have all these other factors which we call limiting factors or reducing factors, and this is the guys that we must manage during the whole production system. Limiting factors talking about water or then irrigation, nutrients is the feeding of the plants, seed, and what we can these days put in here is funds or capital. How much money do we have? And then of course the reducing factors is stuff like weeds, pests and diseases. And as I said, it's our function as producers to get as close as possible to the potential yield, push up the actual yield as far as possible. Now, normally we will talk about 85% or 80 to 90% of the actual yield is really good in relation to the potential yield. So we will look at all these production factors as we move along. A next step there is the market. Unfortunately, most of the times we will sort of plant what we want to plant and not what the market demands. What's the most easiest to grow? In most countries is that the issue, because we will overproduce some of the stuff and underproduce where there is most money to be made. So varieties do have certain characteristics like shape, size, color, flavor, storage ability. The consumer will look at bulb size, scale color, scale thickness, scale retention, number of scales, bulb firmness, etc. As producers, and looking just at nutrition, we must know what's the effect of nutrition on all of this. But in this, there's another thing that we must keep in mind, and I will come later to that, is that certain cultivars and certain regions in our country does not have the ability to produce onion or whatever that's to have a long storage ability, and I will come to that in a second. This is more or less and that's to my view, the production area in South Africa with about 9 to 10,000 hectares, around about 600 to 700,000 tons that's produced during the year. Define two areas in the country with the southern and the northern part, which I will come to in a second, and show you what's the difference between the two of them. Now, a bit on the phenology, agronomy, and morphology of the plant. This is some of the growth stages that the onion have. For me, the most important part of the growing seasons is the first stages that we see in the bottom, or to the bottom left, is from germination till we have our first fall of leaves, because this is the most sensitive part of the whole onion's growing stages. This is here where you will have damping of diseases. You will have, if you plant seeds, direct sowing, you will have issues with wind damage. So yeah, it's important to look good after your seedlings, or whatever you're planting seedlings of seed direct sowing. And a cover crop mostly is important here, or sometimes it's called a nursing crop, just to protect your seedling in this stage. So you will sow something in planting your onions, and you will just kill it later on by a herbicide just before planting or after planting your seed in the soils. So that's just important to have a look at that one. Just on the onion, it's a biennial plant, so it takes most around about 2 years to go through from seed to seed. This is an important slide. Just talk about the types of onions that we produce. Looking at Daniel in Brazil, they will mostly have short day. Onions are very sensitive to day length, and it can be divided in 3 types of onions according to the day length, latitude degrees where they grow. So the short day onions will grow from 30 degrees less towards the equator. This is the short day type of onions. Then you have the intermediate types, which is between 30 and 45. And that's what I've talked about, that South Africa is sort of divided in 2 parts there. We have the short day types in the north and the more intermediate in the south. We don't have any long days types here. If we take this into account, it immediately shows us that we have 2 different ways of propagating or cultivating onions in the country, and we must always keep that in mind. Something on the morphology of the plant, it's actually just the bulb. What we're looking at is leaves. We have a reduced stem at the bottom, a disc, what we see there to the right, with a very poor developed root system, advantageous root system. We must always keep that in mind, that we have one of the crops with the poorest root systems in the whole vegetable family, if I can call it like that. Doesn't even have root hairs. Some of the Mycorrhizae family have to replace the functions of the root hair for the onion plant. And I will come back to the roots within a second. The shoot will grow out of the apex or the apical bud in the middle, which we will later found in the flowers, and the seed will grow out of that. On the bulb there, interesting fact is that number of leaves in the bulb doesn't really have effect on the end of the weight of a bulb. It's more the size or the thickness of the leaves or the scales that determine the weight. So you will find, for instance, one with 11 leaves will have a lower weight than one with 9. So it's the thickness of the scale that makes the weight. Yes, just to illustrate poor developed root system, if we look at the top table that I have there, you will see that immediately below the disc, you will find the most roots. As you move laterally to the right, you will find that it decreases quite rapidly, as well as you move down into the soil from 10 to 20 centimeters. And the bottom table, you will see the distribution. As you will compare different crops with each other, you will find that, say, a brassica will have 10 times more roots. So it's totally a different ballgame when you think about the 2 different crops, and you will have to look differently. Seed quality is another important growth factor that we must keep in mind, because I do find in my experience, customers or producers tend to buy what's available or what the seed merchant wants to sell him. Most of the time, a big bugger up, because if the seeds gets too old, it loses some of its germination capacity, or vigor, as we would call it, and you will have a bad in the field. Just from the top down, you'll have to look at diseases. There's about 200 to 240,000 seeds per kilogram. Look for other seeds, weeds and stuff like that. And as I've mentioned, you must have a look at the germination capacity or percentage of the seed that you're busy to buy. Make sure that it's, I would say, nearer to 90% germination percentage than lower than that. Obviously, there's a difference between the open pollinated types versus the F1 hybrids, which should be much higher. Then another thing is, please make sure that you treat your seed before planting with some fungicides. I've mentioned some names there. Don't take me to court about that one. But also we do have a product by the name of Tepricin Bio, which is some nutrients that you can put on the seed, which will help with developing seed and the early growth stages, which have phosphorus and zinc and some other magic in it. So we do have very good results with treating our seeds with that. Moving to the next one, Daniel also referred to this. This is the types of propagation or cultivation that we have. Is direct seeding, where you will plant direct into the soil and into the fields. The plants will stay there for the whole growing season. You won't replant or transplant them. So this is the direct planting of seeds, and we'll use 4 to 5 kilograms of seed per hectare to go up to 700 or 800 plants, 800,000 plants per hectare. Then we have a system with transplants where you will have seed beds, which you will plant in the autumn, 60 to 65 kilogram of seeds per hectare, which will be enough for around about 10 hectares of transplants. And this will then be transplanted in the mid of the winter, towards the end of the winter, or perhaps a little bit later on. And I will show you a few slides on that one within a second. And then we have this thing that they call sets, onion sets. We call it in Afrikaans bolletjies. This is what you see in the right-hand side. It's not used that much anymore, but it's also a way of propagating onions in South Africa. Direct seeding is mostly used for the short day type of plants, more to the north, although we do direct seeding in the rest of the country to the south as well. But transplants is more the thing for the intermediate type of planting, and I will talk about that a bit later on as well. This is just a photo to show you how the seed beds look like. You will see this is where high density plants is planted, and to the left you will just see some roots that I've taken a photograph of that. But this is where we have about then 60 to 65 kilograms of seeds per hectare, or around about 10 to 12 million plants per hectare, which will be transported later on. This is just the way that we do it. You will see that just on the transplants, a very important thing is to make sure that your plants is hardened off very good. So there is a hardening off process. That's very important, not to plant a transplant that's too soft, because it won't make it through the whole transport process in replanting. And another thing is to keep in mind, wherever you're planting, make sure that your rotation crop, which you've used, the herbicides that you spray on them, won't affect the onions the next year or whenever you do it. So have a look at things like nitribuzin of sulfuron ureas, that it causes it's a carryover effect that you might get. So have a look at herbicides that you use on your rotation crop. So this is the way of how we do it. It's a big roller on your left, which you will see, which make little holes in the field, and then it's transplanted by hand. It's one of them. Very important here is to make sure that there's good contact between the roots and the soil. So the people that's doing the job make sure that they're not just putting it in there, and make sure there's enough soil on the transplant. Yeah, a good practice is to just after planting it, put some water on it, irrigate it, to make sure that you have that contact that I'm talking about. Best practice management rule is to make sure that you have a good soil analysis, but do look at your pH and make sure that you have a pH between 5.8 and 6.5 kCl, because onion tend not to like too much a acidic type of soil. If you lime, make sure that you have a good lime which you're using, and it's put into the soil 2 to 3 months before planting. And it's really good. There's a good mix or plowing effect to get a good mix of the lime into the soil. Another thing to keep in mind is that if you use irrigation, which most people will do, salinity is a big no-no for onions. It doesn't like saline conditions. Saline water, I've found that if you move over 110 millisiemens per meter, or in the unit that we use here, 1.1, immediately you will get a reduction in your yield from 1.1 or 110 millisiemens per meter. There is just a immediate effect on what will happen to your potential yield, what we talked about in one of the previous slides, as well as the soil salinity, which is shown on the brown graph. But do have a look at it. Don't use bad water on onions. Use it on another crop, but not on onions. So it's really sensitive to saline conditions. Good. Let's move on to the fertilization part. This is just a graph to show the uptake curve illustrate the uptake curve of onions. It's work done by a old or late colleague of mine, Andy Comery, in the 90s. And you will see that onions do have a huge demand for fertilizer or nutrition if you want a good yield. And as you will see there, at some stages it goes over 220 kilograms of nitrogen per week, nearly 30 kilograms of potassium per week. But have a look at the red line and you will see calcium there. At that stage, the plant do need more calcium sometimes, or most of the times, than with what the soil can provide or what is available from the soil. And this is then the part where we will give extra calcium, as Daniel also mentioned, where you will use then the calcium nitrate or Natribor in that stages, as well as have a look at the phosphorus, which the need is around about 3 to 4 kilograms, up to 5 kilograms per week. This is just an example of a fertilizer recommendation which we use in the southern parts on sandy soils, and this is for transplants. You will see that on the top is 300 kilograms of nitrogen, 110 potassium, 340, and the calcium, magnesium, and the sulfur that we have there. So it's something that we sort of give everything about every week. Of course, it's a sandy soil, but please also have a look at week 4, where we will give extra phosphorus, and we do get a good result with doing that. But also this is the area then which I've shown you where you will need extra calcium, and see the calcium column there. You will see the extra calcium that we will bring in there, and that calcium is coming mostly from calcium nitrate blends that we do and use in that stage. We go up to week 10 with our fertilizer program, but usually we will do something in week 12 as well. Perhaps just potassium application, potassium sulfate most of the times, which we will use in there. So that's for the more sandy soils. If we go to the northern parts, in the stronger soils, the loamy type of soil, clayish soils, you will see that's for the short day cultivars, mostly grown there, about 180 nitrogen, and phosphorus also around about 100. It looks perhaps too much at this stage, but that areas do have some calcareous soils, so that's the issue for the phosphorus. Potassium around about 200, and you will see the rest there as well. You will see then that there's a huge difference between how you will fertilize your onions in the south versus the north. And it's all coming back to the type of onion that we will grow, the intermediate or the short day one, and also, of course, the type of soil that we farm in. This is just the removal. I will pass that because my time is running out. Nitrogen, important here is that there must be a balance between ammonium and nitrate nitrogen in your program. It doesn't really have a huge with ammonium nitrate. The issue is just ammonium nitrate will have a competition effect with your other cations like calcium, magnesium, and potassium, whereas when you use nitrates, it will help with the uptake of that three elements. So just keep that in mind. Too much nitrogen, you will see the effect, too soft bulbs are too soft, delaying of maturity, and so on. Phosphorus, I've talked about that, especially affect cold, wet soils, which we have in winter. You will have to give huge more than usually recommended in other times of the year. It's really necessary to get the plants growing because your phosphorus is the energy of the plant, and we will call it the Red Bull of the plant, if I may use the name. And that's also the issues with the poor root system that we have that I've talked about. So extra phosphorus as a leaf application is very necessary at certain stages. And I think Felipe will talk a bit about potassium, so I'll pass that. Just have a look at the calcium. That's very important for quality. And there's some work that we have done, and I won't go into that, but that's where the extra nitrogen, calcium nitrate will come in. Sulfur, important, but keep in mind that there's a specific ratio between nitrogen and sulfur. And if the sulfur get too high, you will get a negative effect on the uptake of your nitrogen, and your plants will go light of color and yellowish of color, and you will see if as soon as you give just a plain nitrogen again, everything will change. Micronutrients, sensitive for deficiencies of copper, manganese, and zinc. So make sure that you apply enough of that as a leaf spray. So copper, manganese, and zinc is the three very important micronutrients for this crop. And just to summarize, and guys, sorry for taking too much time, but I think this is the important one. Just another minute. I've divided it for us in intermediate and short day types. Okay, just intermediate growing, and I've mentioned that one, but the sowing time is for the intermediate is end of April to May, and you have the early and medium and late types. And for the short day, it will be from January to April. Intermediates is mostly transplanted, so you will have a seedbed system with transplanting it later on, and your short day is mostly direct sowing. Growing period 6 to 7 months. This one is a bit shorter. Then you have bulb maturity, because it's the issue of day length. It's from spring, early summer. The short day will be late summer to autumn. Harvesting from mid-November to January, and your harvesting will be from August, from the short day to mid-November. So they will sort of go in tandem there. Fertilization, intermediate, you will have a seedbed phase with no short day phase, and the transplants then, which I will put here. This is direct sowing. As I've mentioned it earlier, quite a heavy application of nutrients, 310, 100 and 350 to 420, with only 120 to 30 kilograms of potassium for the short day cultivars. Irrigation for both of the types of onions. The last paragraph of the last table there is both are OPs and hybrids. This is a huge difference between the two types. Is the intermediate to have a straw color to a dark brown with thick scales, and the short day is mostly light brown and can also be just a white onion with not that thick scales. This do have a direct influence on the storage ability, and just passing plant population going to typical yield. For the intermediate, you can go from 70 to 110 tons per hectare, but the short day it's 40 to 80 tons per hectare. Then the storage ability is medium to long for your intermediate, but only short to medium for the short day plants. Guys, then you can have a look at our website on yara.co.za if you want any more information. And this is my story. Sorry, I've stolen some time from you, Felipe, but I think we can go over that a bit. Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
Peter, thank you very much for your most informative presentation. I'd just like to stress that this webinar will be available to all participants later, so one can look at some of those tables and graphs and points that Peter has made in more detail in your own time. Our third presentation today is by Felipe. Felipe will talk on nutritional management to improve export onion quality, and that's a Mexican experience. Thank you very much, Felipe.
Thank you, Duncan. Thank you for having me. Well, I would like to wish a good day to all of you. Thank you for joining us today. As Duncan mentioned, I will show to you an experience that we have it in Mexico in order to improve the export onions quality. I'll just give a quick overview about what represents the onions for the Mexican market. And I will show to you the field evaluation that we did together with a commercial farmer in Mexico in order to increase the bulb size. Well, onion in Mexico, if you look to the agriculture, that is in Mexico, onion is the 5th vegetable most cultivated in Mexico. And in Mexico, as total has 31 different states, and out of these 31, for 10 states, onion is the major crop cultivated in that 10 states. And also in Mexico produce onions not only for the internal market, but also Mexico, it's a big producer of onions for export. That means that onions represent for Mexico also an important source of income to the country. As we can see here in this data, in the year of 2019, this is the most recent data I find it. If you look to the total world onion export in value in dollars per year, we will see that Mexico, it was the country number 4. So that means that around 9% of all the value of the export onions in the world comes from Mexico. So with this, we can see that onions really represents to Mexico an import source of income to the country. This also means that quality is very important in onions in Mexico, because Mexico produces onions for export. And obviously, export market that pay good prices in general, but also requires a high standard of quality in onions. And so that's the reason why this trial was also conducted in Mexico. Here in this picture, you can see this is, I would like to thank, obviously, this is Aline Palacios. It's our agronomist in Mexico. It was the agronomist responsible for this field trial that I will show to you. And this picture, it was really just in a pre-harvest evaluation where you can see the quality of the onions in this field. And this is the reason why bulb size, it's really so important for the Mexican farmers, or in general for the all export markets, I guess. Because here we can see the difference in price paid. And we can see that on the left side, if you see it, you see that onions that has a diameter lower than 14 centimeters. In general, the price goes from 5 to 10 cents of dollars per kilo. Below you can have the reference about what representing rands in South African rands will be between 0.7 and 1.4 per kilo. And the onions that has the size bigger, the diameter bigger than 14 centimeters, then the price it's around 18 cents of dollars per kilo. That will be around 2.5 South African rands per kilo. So you can really see the gap, the difference between the price paid for the onions that are above 14 centimeters and below 14 centimeters. So that's the reason why for the Mexican farmers, the bulb size, it's very important. And then we conducted a trial in a commercial farmer, exactly to check what we can do from the nutritional management point of view to improve bulb size in onions. These are the data from the field evaluation. It was the evaluation conducted in the city of Tepalcingos in the Morelos state in Mexico. In all that area, the average pH in that area in Mexico, it's between 7.5, 8.8 in water, not in KCl. So this soil pH, it's pH in water, so it's alkaline soils. And the irrigation water also contains an alkaline pH. The pH of the irrigation water, it's between 7.4 and 8.5. It's average from the area. In this farmer, we conducted the trials with 1 hectare, split because the farmer has irrigation sectors of 1 hectare. So we did 1 sector of irrigation with our treatment and another sector with 1 hectare with the standard farmer treatment, the control. The irrigation system, and it's drip irrigation with fertigation. So all the side dressings are made with fertigation, via fertigation. The variety, it was an hybrid 4043 from Seminis. And here an important point, the density. As you can see, it's 250,000 plants per hectare. Planted with double rows. If you look to the picture on the left down corner in the picture, you see the drip line, the hose, or the drip line, and on the both sides of the hose, you see 2 lines of onions, 1 in each side of the drip line. This is what they call drip line with double rows. In each drip line, they plant a double row of onions, 1 in each side. But pay attention on the density. The density, it's really quite low. It's 250,000 plants per hectare. It's quite different from South Africa or from north of Brazil, as Daniel just showed to you. The average yield in the area, in the whole area, it's around 30 metric tons per hectare. But on this farmer, on the farmer where we conducted this trial, the farmer average, it's around 40 metric tons per hectare. So this is the standard, just to show you how we started. When our agronomist contacted the farmer, and then the farmer said to our agronomist that he would like to improve the bulb size of the onions due to the price difference, obviously. So then, okay, we asked all the data and what the farmer were doing till that moment as fertilization scheme. And then here you can see in points of nutrients what the farmer was applying in that time. But keep in mind, again, that this amount of nutrients that the farmer is applying, it was the intention of the farmer, it was to support a yield of around 40 metric tons per hectare, because they use 250,000 plants per hectare. Obviously, if he has a high density, 700,000 plants per hectare, as Peter just showed, obviously the yield will be higher and we will need to use a higher amount of nutrients as well. So this amount of nutrients, it's related to that condition. So just to give it to you an idea, we started with around 800 kilos of fertilizers per hectare with this amount of nutrients. And then what we did, on top of the soil analysis, water analysis, standard farmer practice, and the results achieved with that farmer using the standard program. So then we build up our proposal with our concept. And then you can see here by each phenological stage, the proposal we did. And then I will go showing to you step by step the main difference and also explaining why we made these suggestions. Basically, you can see here that the main difference is that we reduce, if you compare the green line, it's SQM proposal, and the white line, it's the standard treatment, farmer treatment. You see that mainly we decrease it considerably, the amount of nitrogen that the farmer applied, increase it a little bit phosphorus. As Peter mentioned, phosphorus is quite important for onions. Increase a little bit the amount of potassium, decrease the total amount of sulfur, increase it the amount of calcium, and also add some magnesium, boron, and zinc. So let's show to you one by one the main points and the main difference on these trials. First of all, why we reduced this amount of nitrogen? So if you look at it, it's a considerable reduction. We did one of the reasons why it was because if you look to the form of nitrogen applied in the farmer treatment, it was more or less like 50-50, 51% as nitrate, 49% as ammonium. In our proposal that we developed, we are applying 72% from the total nitrogen applied in nitrate form and 28% in ammoniacal form. And then we have that difference in efficiency of the form of nitrogen. As all of us know, nitrate nitrogen, it's more efficient than ammoniacal nitrogen for the plant. So that allows us to use nitrogen in a more efficient way. And that's the reason why I would like to use this animation to explain to you and exemplify why we can use, let's say, less amount of nitrogen when we are using nitrate nitrogen. It's due to the synergistic antagonistic effect. When you use ammonium that has a positive charge, with ammonium, plant cannot uptake together with ammonium, potassium, calcium, and magnesium because all of them are cations. And then with this one, plant cannot keep the electrical balance. When you use nitrates, that nitrate has a negative charge, nitrate can be uptaken together with potassium, calcium, magnesium, that they are cations. This has a synergism. So then this means when we apply nitrate nitrogen, that's the preferred source of nitrogen for plant uptake, we are also increasing the uptake of other cations because we are applying nitrate nitrogen. As also Daniel showed in one of his slides in his presentation, if you remember, now when they have nitrates in the nutrient solution, the content of potassium, calcium, magnesium was higher. And that's the reason why using a higher amount of nitrate nitrogen, we can be more efficient with the use of nitrogen. So that was the reason why we reduce some nitrogen. Another difference that we have in the program is the considerable difference is the amount of sulfur applied. All of us know that sulfur, it is an essential element, especially for onions. Now, onions need sulfur for the pungency of the onions. But we need to take care about the amount, avoid the excess, and also how we apply the sulfur. If you see, we are applying less sulfur than the standard treatment, but if you look to the phenological stages that we are applying sulfur in all phenological stages during the development of the onions. And if you look to the standard treatment, farmer was applying sulfur only at the end, during the bulb enlargement stage, and we know sulfur during the crop development. So if you use sulfur during the whole season, we can also be more efficient with the use of sulfur, and you need to take care about to avoid the excess of sulfurs. This is an example to you because it's quite common the way of think that, okay, as much sulfur as better for the onions because onions need a lot of sulfur. Yes, onions need sulfur, but not a lot and not as much as better because sulfur, as all the other nutrients, the mineral nutrients, it is a salt. So all mineral nutrients that we apply in our soil, they are salts. And if we apply in excess, we will be accumulating salts. Then we have soil salinity, that means we will increase the EC, electrical conductivity. And also, as Peter just showed to you in a graphic a few minutes ago, you see that onions, it's quite sensitive to the EC. If we increase too much the EC, we decrease the yield level or the yield potential. So apply the right amount of all mineral nutrients, not only sulfur, nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, calcium, magnesium, whatever, it is essential in order to keep the EC under control. So just to give you an example, if you look to the onion nutrient requirement, you see that more or less, in average, of course, now for each metric ton of onion, we will need around 2.2 kilograms of potassium SK and around 0.6 or 0.55 in average of sulfur. This gives to us a ratio for each 1 kilogram of potassium required, we needed 270 grams of sulfur. If you supply, let's imagine, all the potassium that our onion needs with potassium sulfate, and potassium sulfate contains 42% SK and 18 SS. This is a ratio for each 1 kilogram of potassium for 430 grams of sulfur. So this means applying this ratio, that if we apply all the potassium that the onions need with potassium sulfate, we will be applying around 59% more sulfur than our crop needs. And this only considering if you use only potassium sulfate, because if you use magnesium sulfate as magnesium source, then you have more sulfur. If you use ammonium sulfate as nitrogen source, then you have even more sulfur. So then when you do this balance, we need to consider all the sources that we will apply in our program and all the nutrients that these sources contain. And then we will be able to do the nutrient balance for the plant uptake. So then this is the reason why we really need to do these calculations and avoid the excess of sulfur. So, and this, for me, this is one information that it's very important. As I mentioned to you before, this is a scheme that was developed for a farmer that used 250,000 plants per hectare with an average yield of 40 metric tons. Obviously, if you use 700,000 plants per hectare with 80 metric tons, the total amount of nutrients that you will need apply will be different. But the balance per phenological stage, the balance or the ratio between the elements, that will not change. And here I would like to have a look in the phenological stages that are inside the red square. On the left side, establishment, leaf growth, bulb formation, and bulb enlargement. And look on the right side, the nitrogen-potassium ratio per phenological stage. Now, you see that we started with a 1 to 0.8 establishment, 1 to 0.1 nitrogen to 0.3 potassium in leaf growth, really a vegetative stage, more nitrogen. Then we come back again to a more stable ratio, 1 to 1 nitrogen potassium in bulb formation. And that is the game changer, especially for increased bulb size. It's during the bulb enlargement stage, then really increase the ratio between nitrogen and potassium. As you can see, for each 1 kilogram of nitrogen, 4.7 of potassium. But look that in SQM proposal, in all the stages, we have nitrogen and potassium in all the stages. If you look to the farmer treatment, you see that in the 3 first stages, farmers apply nitrogen and the other elements, but no potassium. And then in bulb enlargement, in the last stage, he applies really only potassium and sulfur. So it's quite important for the plants. Plants need all the elements during all the season, but in different ratios, different balance between the elements. And this is what we should try to do, fine-tune this balance in order to help the plant, support the plant, to the plant achieve the highest yield as possible according to the genetic material characteristics. So if you look to this one, I would like to use the same slide that Peter used it in his presentation. Thank you, Peter, for sharing this slide with me. That exactly show what the ratio that you use it to develop the program. If you look, we came to a ratio with higher in nitrogen in comparison with potassium till the beginning of the bulb formation stage, and from the bulb enlargement stage, that was the moment that really increased the amount of potassium in the program. So if you look to the fertilization scheme that we developed, that fits really perfect in these curves, in these graphs, and this is what we should try to do, not only with the onions, but with all the crops. It's supply the mineral nutrients with or according the nutrient uptake demand of the plant. So if you look to this ratio in total, then in total you see that our ratio from our proposal, it was a ratio from the total fertilization scheme between 1:1. At the end of the season, more or less, same amount of nitrogen and same amount of potassium applied. We have difference, but these differences are between the phenological stages. If you look, according to the phenological stages, we have the difference, but in total, around 1:1. In farmer treatment, the total ratio, it was 1:0.5. That means that farmer was applied, from the total amount of nitrogen applied 50% of potassium. And the last difference, it was in the total amount of fertilizers applied. In farmer treatment, applied 809 kilos. In the proposal that we developed, it's 729 kilos. That means less 80 kilos of fertilizer per hectare. This means if all mineral fertilizer are salts, and if I apply less 80 kilos of fertilizer per hectare, this means that I also applied less salts. This means also less impact on the EC, electrical conductivity. And again, onions are quite sensitive to EC, to salinity, as was showed before. So then if you have less EC, less salinity, it's an ideal environment to the plant develop and produce more yield. So these were the difference. This was the program that we developed. Let's go to the evaluation at harvest. These are pictures from the field in Mexico, from where we are at the harvesting time. A picture of one of the formulas that we use it. This is the last formula for during the bulb enlargement. You can see it's 7 nitrogen, 12 phosphorus, and 40 potassium. So it's a really high ratio between nitrogen and potassium. And that's really targeting increase the bulb size. So this was the numbers that we achieved, the evaluation. In Mexico, they have 4 classes of onions. They have colossal and large. These are the big ones. Colossal is really the big ones. Large is the big ones. And medium and small. So if you look in total in yield, in farmer treatment, produced 42 metric tons. That was in the average of the farmer. In general, the farmer average is 40 metric tons. In our sector, in our field, we achieved 45 metric tons. So that's in total yield, we have 7% increase in total yield. But the game changer, it was in this production when you look to the size class, to the classification. In our treatment, if you take all together the colossal and the large, that are the onions above the 14 centimeters diameter, we have 66% from the onions harvested in one of that classifications. And in farmers treatment, it was 46% in the largest classes. So that means in the class where we have the highest prices, we have an increase in 43% in the onions in the highest price class. That was give a result, let's say, in income, as gross income to the farmer when you do these calculations, an increase in gross income of 27% by the price paid for the onions in that harvest. So let's go to the net income. And so then we have if you look to the first line, that's the fertilization cost. Obviously, the program that we developed, it was more expensive. First of all, because contained, as I showed to you, more than 70% from the nitrogen, it was in nitrate form. And all of us know that nitrogen, it is more expensive than the other nitrogen sources, but it is also more efficient. So then normally always a program that it's higher in nitrate nitrogen will be more expensive, but also will be more efficient, as we just show here in these results. So this is the difference in comparison with the standard. We have $436 for farmer and $668 in our treatment. That means $232 more per hectare, or 53% higher in S fertilization cost. All the other cost was the same. The only thing that we changed it on this treatment, it was the fertilization scheme. All the other activities, labors, sprayers, phytosanitary control, whatever, it was exactly the same. So the cost was the same for both. That gives it was a total cost of $4,893 for SQM and $4,661 for the standard farmer. That means that represents an increase in 5% in total cost. And this is something important, because sometimes when we are discussing the cost of the mineral nutrition, then you say, yeah, but your fertilization scheme is 50% higher in price, so I will produce 50% more to pay that one. No, that's wrong, because when you discuss just the fertilization scheme, this is the cost of the fertilization scheme. If you look to the impact of this cost in the total cost, it is 5%. So this means that with an increase of 5%, we will pay this 53% more of the fertilization cost. But as we saw, the gross income, it was 27% higher. So that means that give it to us 22% as net profit. And in money, that represents, by the price paid in this season, more $1,153 per hectare for this farmer. This is net income, after paid the extra cost of $232 from the fertilization scheme. And this is mainly due to the increase on the bulb size, on the size class of the farmers. But this is not all the story. We also did another test. We did a test about the weight loss after storage, because it's quite common. Some onion farmers also storage onions and start to sell it along the time. So what we take it, we simulated a strong situation. We take it 10 large and colossal onions from both treatments, and we put it in a plastic bag and store it in a refrigerated temperature of around 4 Celsius degrees for a period of 21 days. And then you can see here what's happened on the top line, SQM, here is standard. At the day that we harvest and collect the 10 onions in SQM have the 638 grams as weight and 556 from the farmer. That is correct, because as we saw in our treatment, we have a higher average of the bulb size. And then we start to measure each 7 days. We can see the difference on 7 days, on 14 days, and 21 days. So after 21 days, the total weight loss from the initial weight, it was 64 grams for the SQM treatment and 119 for the standard treatment. So as you can see, in comparison with the initial weight, in SQM treatment, we have 10% loss of weight after storage, and in standard treatment, 21% loss of weight after storage. This is also an effect of the higher calcium content, and one of the benefits, higher also potassium and magnesium content in the solution, since we have more nitrates in the nutrient solution. That means, say, if you look to this difference, that we have less 50% loss of weight during the storage period when you do the comparison between these both treatments. And I also would like to highlight to you that the program was designed according to the standard of the grower, and also the limitations of the grower according to the cost and so on. We strongly believe that if we could do better improvements without limitations of cost, and also we could apply maybe some more nutrients in the right balance per hectare, we also could reach maybe 50 or 55 metric tons per hectare, since only 66% of the onions in our field was in the top classes. That means that we still have 34% of the onions that we can improve and increase size, and that will increase weight as well. So we still have a gap for improvements. And this is what I prepared to you. Thank you for your attention. I hope that you get the concept of the way how we developed the scheme and not the numbers. Thank you.
Right, thank you, guys, and thank you for all attending. I've got 3 questions that I think we can answer very briefly. So if Peter and Daniel can just come onto the screen, please. And I think what's come up once or twice is the aspect of sulfur. Dr. Hema says sulfur plays a major role in the suppression of diseases such as rots, which it probably no doubt does, but it probably in excess may upset balanced nutrition. And Nicholas Mini says sulfur also very important to increase storability of bulbs, which I think is also very important. But would you guys like to comment possibly on sulfur and possibly versus the excess of sulfur? Felipe, maybe you would comment on just the excess of sulfur, perhaps?
Yes, exactly. Well, first of all, the colleagues are right. And sulfur is an essential element. It is an important, and we need to apply it. But the point, if you look at, we talk about the excesses, because sulfur it is important. And if we look to the average between sulfur and the other elements, onions is really one of the crops that need more sulfur in comparison with the other elements if you compare with the other crops. But this does not mean that you need to apply as much sulfur as you can for onions and then it will be good. No. What we're talking about is to avoid the excesses. So we have the extraction. So with the extraction, we know how much we needed to apply per metric ton produced. Then we know how much we produce, our yield. And then I have a number. Okay, if I produce 80 metric tons, and if I need 500 grams of sulfur per metric ton, that's nice. That means that I need to apply 40 kilos, let's say, just using general numbers, just for example. Okay, so I have a number. If I need to apply 40, why are you apply 80 or 100 or 120 and 20? So when you're talking about this, it's please consider this, do the calculations, and avoid the excess. And not only for sulfur, it is the same concept for potassium or for nitrogen or for phosphorus. If you apply nitrogen in excess, we will have problems as well. If you apply potassium in excess, we will have problems as well. So the main point and the highlight, it's about to avoid the excess. Consider the numbers, do the calculations, and apply the right amount. Avoid the excess. That's the
Thank you, Felipe. Okay, there's a question from Marcel, which I can maybe send to Daniel. Marcel says, do not forget that copper is important for scale formation. It might come via copper fungicides, otherwise it needs to be given. Failure possible. Consider copper EDTA perhaps, but I think what's important is all trace elements are important. So one perhaps needs to know what's in the soil and then maybe give 1 or 2 foliar applications. Daniel?
Yes. Thank you for asking. But the copper we use in the end of cycle of the onion in Brazil to improve color in the skin. Reduce the disease and have more time of storage, but the mostly reason is improve color. In Brazil, it's very common the yellow onion, yellow brownish. The Brazilian don't like the white onion. And the copper has this function of improve color.
Yeah, okay. Peter, are you there yet? No, we still can't hear you. But there is a question aimed at you. It is there a return on investment difference between the Yara trials versus farmer practice? Now, I can answer that because I've seen the work done by Neville Rath, which I can possibly send to Dr. Hema at a later stage, or I can ask you to send it on to him. And then Rian asks, are there any statistical data available on the trials? And I'm sure most of us do have statistical data, so we can get that together and also send that on to Rian. Right, guys, I think that's the end. We've gone over our time a bit, but I particularly like to thank everyone who has registered and who has listened. And the The presentations will be available after the event, and I hope you've got some valuable information out of it. I found it most interesting, the 3 Brazilian regions, and I found Piet's detailed information on the fertilizer applications and the different varieties very interesting. And Felipe, your presentation on the concept of balanced nutrition of nitrates facilitating the uptake of other cations and avoiding excess sulfates, which often farmers do apply excess sulfates because they apply everything as potassium sulfate, and it just doesn't make sense, although it is an important ion. But thanks very much for everyone for attending. Thank you for the SQM marketing team for organizing this, and we'll sign out now. And any questions can be sent to us. You will be able to get the email addresses off the website. Thank you very much. Good day. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye. Thank you.